Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm joined with a bunch of my plants from home that desperately need to be repotted, and I'm just going to walk you through the ins and outs and some tips that I have on making sure that they're transferred to a new happy little home. All right, so I've got a couple different supplies, including a few different kinds of soil mixes, a few different shovels, some little tools and things like that to make the job a little easier, empty pots, and all the plants that need to be transferred. All right, so let's jump right into it. I have a few little propagated stems that I want to get into some soil. After a little while, when they sit in water for too long, you'll notice that the leaves just start to look a little bit tired. Although these are looking really good, but they do have pretty good roots on them, so I would say that they're ready to be potted in soil. So I'm gonna just grab a smaller pot. I don't want to put it in anything too big since it's not really used to being in soil. I kind of want to ease it into that. So I'm just going to use like a regular potting soil. Get some in the bottom there. And I'm going to make a mess. Inevitably. So once I get a little bit in the bottom, kind of put the roots that I do have in there, just to see how tall it needs to be. You might notice when you take a cutting from water, from being propagated in water and putting it straight in soil, it might shock just a little bit at first because it's not quite used to that medium. But I would say that they tend to end up being quite a lot happier. They can pull a lot more nutrients from soil and have a little bit more wiggle room. And usually I wait, if I am propagating something in water, I wait until the roots are about 3 inches long or longer. All right, so we're getting closer to the top of the pot. I usually leave like a 1/2 inch from the soil level to the top of the pot, just so that there's plenty of room to water, and when you water the first few times, it's not overflowing. But you do want to make sure that the soil isn't pressed down too hard, but is kind of compact around those roots so there isn't too much air or anything, and so that the soil doesn't settle too much after you start watering it and it sits on your shelf. You don't want the roots to end up being exposed or anything like that. So just some nice little pats on the top of the soil. Kind of adjust the leaves. There we have first little repotted plant. All right, so next I need to empty this pot to pot one of my little propagated stems in. But I have this little peperomia that is looking really sad, and I think that I've just had it in way too much light, that it's drying out faster than I can keep it watered. There's also always the challenge of using a potting soil that has a lot of peat in it, which is what is in potting mix that really holds on to water. And if that peat dries out too much, it's really hard to rehydrate. And I think in this instance, it was in too much sun, and it is a pretty succulent-like plant, so I wasn't watering it much at all. And I think it just dried out too much that now it isn't able to retain that water. So I'm gonna move it to a pot that might be a bit more breathable than this one, so that I can water it a little bit more often, and hopefully I won't have that same issue of it drying out too much. So I'm gonna choose a terracotta one, which is usually my first choice. Next being something really cute and small, which also presents its own challenges because smaller pots are just harder to keep watered. So we're just gonna move it back to a tried and true terracotta pot, and I'll probably move it out of direct sunlight because I think it is getting a little too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill this pot with some succulent soil, since it is a more succulent-like peperomia, so it will appreciate a soil that drains a little bit better. So I've got just enough of soil in the bottom of the pot to get started. So we're gonna carefully kind of encourage this to wiggle out of the pot. When something is really dried out like this, you do have to be pretty careful because probably means that the roots are pretty dry, which makes them a bit more susceptible to breaking, and you just want to be careful not to cause any major breakage. So we'll just give it a little wiggle. So usually I would be a little aggressive, just like trying to get all of the soil off of the roots so that they have a little bit of freedom. But there really is not a lot going on there, so we're gonna be really careful with this. Usually if I notice that, I would maybe soak the root ball in water just to loosen it up a bit more gently, but I think this should be good. I'm just gonna put some more soil in the pot. I was expecting the roots to be a bit more extensive. So this will go back in my bedroom. I do get really good western light in there, so pretty bright light in the evening. It'll go probably on a bookshelf or something like that, just so it's a bit safer from the sun. Okay, that should stay up a lot better in this bigger pot than the smaller one. Okay, the roots on this one, as you can see, are really starting to grow in circles, which is usually a good sign that it's starting to get a bit root bound, which makes sense because it was really hard to keep this thing well watered because a lot of what was in the pot was roots. So we're just giving it a really good gentle tease just to get it out of that, to kind of break the root memory a little bit. A lot of people think a lot differently about a lot of things, but also about what to do when something is root bound. But what I've had a lot of luck with is just shaking all of the soil off of it and really getting it to a point where you can't even tell that it was growing around and around, while being very gentle. It's no time to be rough. So we've got some pretty clean roots there. I'm really liking how that's looking. Got some fresh soil. I'm gonna add a little bit more. And kind of create another little well in the middle. It's gonna look really cute in this pot. That's the fun thing about repotting, as much as it is necessary to do it for the health of your plants. If you're not looking to buy new plants or you don't have room for more plants, it's kind of fun to just shift everything around and see how things look in another pot, and it just is fun because it changes the look of everything, and you don't have to necessarily buy new plants or new pots. Things just look different when they're in different little vessels. So besides it being good for them, it is also fun for you. Out of nowhere, this string of bananas has gotten like 5 feet long, 6 feet long. Is that 6 feet? There's no way it can ever get enough water. It does sit on a really narrow shelf, so the next size up can't be too much bigger. This is maybe an inch. Okay. Wow. The fact that this has rocks in it that's something I did years ago. I haven't put rocks in a pot in a long time. If you want to know how long it's been sitting in this pot for. But hopefully it'll be a little bit happier in this pot. It's definitely surviving and not thriving, but hopefully this will help it thrive. All right, this one requires a bit of an introduction simply because it has been in this pot for, I want to say, 4 years. And it is ready to come out. I've left it in there just because it's been so happy for so long. But it's definitely getting to the point where it never really feels like it's watered. I think there's a lot of root growth happening in there. I'm gonna be very gentle getting this out of here. Because again, when the soil is so dry, The roots tend to be quite dry and very brittle, so gotta be very careful. Also, this pot that I found at a garden center, they just happen to have a shelf where all their other pots were, and they just happen to have a couple like one-off terracotta pots. And I have no idea where this could have come from, but it's all these cute little indentations in it, and it's been covered by this plant for so long. Okay. All right, it's the last one. This beautiful, I can't remember what this is called, but it's my newest plant, and it's been in its little nursery pot for a couple weeks. It's adjusted to my house. I usually try not to pot things as soon as I bring them home. I kind of let them adjust in the pot that they've been growing in, just so they can adjust to my space, and then we're just changing kind of one variable at a time. Kind of sets them up for success. So let's give that a wiggle. And all of this excess soil that comes out of these pots, I don't reuse it just because who knows what kind of nutrients it has left in it, if any, if there were any little pests or anything. I'd rather not reuse it and recycle any issues. So I usually just bring it out to the yard and spread it out in a flower bed or something. Or if I'm here at the shop, I still put it outside in the grass. I don't know if that does anything, but I don't reuse it. I don't really care for or I don't personally collect plants that have like really colorful leaves or anything like that. I like really bold, dark green leaves or silver leaves are something that I'm really drawn to, like a bluish silver. But that's just my personal preference. But you may have noticed that in the ones that I was repotting today. There's also just nothing like a terracotta pot. They're just my favorite. I think plants really like them because they can breathe a little bit. And they just look so classic, and the way that they wear and kind of patina is really pretty. They don't go out of style. I will always love and trust terracotta. It's beautiful. It's also a really great opportunity to get to take a deeper look at the health of your plants, because obviously the leaves are a great teller of how healthy or unhealthy your plant is, but being able to look at their roots, and also just naturally while you're repotting your plants, you're looking a little bit closer at their stems and at the base of the plant and the soil that it was in. So you just kind of get to familiarize yourself with them a little bit more. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend waiting, I think 4 years for some of these plants that have been in their pots. I would definitely encourage you and myself to repot things at the beginning of every growing season, so spring or like midsummer. So I'm glad that I finally got around to repotting some of these plants that I've had at home. I think they'll be healthier and happier for it. I always keep a really close eye on them right after I repot something, just to make sure that they're recovering well from that, because it can be a little bit shocking. But usually it's a great thing, a good idea. I hope that you guys learned maybe a couple little tips about repotting. It seems intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. And thank you for watching. Have a great day.